Federal appeals court delivered President Trump a major blow to his tariffs agenda over the weekend. A panel of judges ruled the president overstepped his authority by imposing reciprocal tariffs on nearly every U.S. trading partner. Now, let's think back about this. As a reminder, these were just some of the countries to see higher tax rates put in place by the Trump administration. In fact, at one point, countries saw tariffs like 100%. In China, increase in reciprocal tariffs. Cambodia, Vietnam also faced high levies, both at nearly 50%. So President Trump wasted no time responding to the federal ruling, posting on social media, writing, if a radical left court is allowed to terminate these tariffs, almost all of this investment and much more will be immediately canceled. In many ways, he says, we would become a third world nation with no hope of greatness again. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now for more on this. Jessica, that is a pretty dismal view here. This appeals court found Trump's actions unfounded, unbounded in scope, and they also added the words unbounded in amount and duration. What does that mean? They also questioned the lack of congressional support. What stood out to you?
I think what it all means is President Trump, if you wanted to try and impose these tariffs, you didn't look to the right statute. And I think that's because there just isn't currently a statute on the books that would give him this authority. So what stood out to me is, number one, we have to remember this is not a constitutional ruling. If President Trump wants to try and impose these tariffs again, he's free, I would argue, under the Constitution to do so. You just need to try and put pressure on Congress to pass a statute that clearly gives that authorization. Why pressure on Congress? Because this is where we go back to the Constitution, Reed, and we say that the Constitution says Congress regulates commerce. And so when does Congress not regulate commerce? When it gives the president some authority to do so. And ultimately, all those words you used before, unfounded, unbounded, it all comes down to the idea that Congress did not delegate authority for these particular tariffs to the president.
Got it. So, but this ruling doesn't apply to every single tariff that Trump has had in place since taking office. Walk us through which tariffs stand and which ones are on hold.
Great question. So because this is a statutory ruling, meaning not based on the Constitution, it's really all of those tariffs that they tried to impose under the IEEPA, one specific statute. And these are the so-called trafficking tariffs and the reciprocal tariffs. So these are the tariffs where there was a much higher percentage, 20 to 25% on Canada, on Mexico, on China. And the other tariffs, you're right, there are other tariffs that are not affected by this ruling.
Got it. And so this reminds me of something that's just two words, and you know what I'm going to say when I say the words emergency docket, right? The president already argued that he could take this case to the Supreme Court. How likely is it that SCOTUS will hear the case?
So I think that we're looking at a question that maybe calls out for Supreme Court review and calls out for a Supreme Court decision, because we're thinking about a major federal question. Does a president have the authority, in this case, under the IEEPA? And again, there are other tariffs, like the tariffs on steel and aluminum, that were part of a different statute. Those are still in place. But under the IEEPA, does the president have the power to do this? Yes, you're right, emergency docket. Now, just because you say to the Supreme Court, I want emergency relief, doesn't mean that the court agrees that they need to act very quickly. It could be that the court sets this for the so-called merits docket. They set this for normal oral arguments and briefing. And frankly, that would give all of us a lot more clarity, because instead of one line, it would be a full ruling on the merits.
I kind of feel like I need an IPA to really figure out the IPEEA that you talk about, Jessica. Thanks for breaking it down. Glad somebody smarter than me is on the screen on this Labor Day. You have a great one. Take care.